Hello, fellow detectives. Welcome to Unlocked, the official podcast for all things Nancy Drew by Her Interactive. I'm your host, Tammy Tuckey, and this week we welcome voiceover artist Emilie Rommel Shimkus to the show. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. You know, I wanted to say really quickly, I was playing this game again the other day just to kind of get a refresher, and I really like the structure of it because when I had originally played it, I was in college, so it was kind of set up in such a similar way to our dorms, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so weird. So I was like, and I really enjoy playing it again because I get that nostalgic feel for college. Did you get that feel like when you played it after, doing everything, or?
A little bit. It's kind of that feeling of, I feel like, I don't know, I always wanted to go to one of those really big, old, cool, schools. I had this kind of obsession when I was younger with, I wanted to go somewhere I had to wear a uniform, and I didn't. So I loved that it was, this walk through a cool old mansion with neat sitting rooms and, it looked like a mansion. I love that feeling. So it was not so much nostalgia as kind of like, oh, I wish I had gone there.
Mine was pretty ordinary, you know what I mean? But if it was in a castle and, it just, that old-timely feel to it, that would be amazing because then we could just explore when we're not studying and that type of thing.
Right.
So.
And surely find a puzzle room.
That would be really cool. That would be really interesting to find that. So when the game was presented to you, first of all, did you read the books for Nancy way back when, right? Mm-hmm. Or were you introduced in a different way to Nancy as a character?
No, I read a ton of Nancy Drew when I was little. My mom had her old books, and so I had the really old ones, the older editions and stuff. And they were all in a big, line in the row of bookshelves right over my bed. I kind of have a good visual of that next to the Mary Poppins books and Little House on the Prairie books and the Redwall books. And I had a big shelf of Nancy Drew books. So I read my way through those, I don't know, probably when I was 9 or 10 or so, starting.
How did you connect with Nancy then? As a person, what did you see in her that you clearly knew that you had as well, too?
Oh, I mean, she doesn't give up. That's what I loved about her was she found a way and, you work. What I like about her is that she works with and around grownups when she needs to. And speaking as a grownup, it's interesting to say that now that was something that I liked about her, coming from, this side of 40 now. It's funny that's the thing that I loved was that she was not antagonistic with grownups, which you find a lot in, kids literature, I feel or juvenile literature. There's a lot of, these adults are stupid and they don't know what they're doing. And I like that she worked with them and had friendly relationships.
Do you read, because I know you have children yourself, do you read Nancy with them? What are their thoughts on her?
Not yet, no. My oldest is 8.5 now, so.
Has she played Warnings at Waverly Academy with you, or no?
No, she hasn't. And actually, it's funny. So my copy I actually gave to my niece because I didn't have kids at the time. And my niece at the time was, I want to say, maybe 10 or something. So she actually has the game at her house.
Did she give it 2 thumbs up?
Yeah, she loved it. She loved playing through it and being like, oh, that's Auntie's voice,
When the audition came for this in particular, because you're an actress and a singer, I heard some of your clips on your YouTube channel, which I love. Your voice is gorgeous. I love it. You. And you're also a poetry reader, so you kind of run the gamut of doing many different types of things. But for this voiceover gig in particular, how did you hear about it? Were there a couple of different opportunities for all the girls in the game to audition for, or were you just kind of focused on one once you heard about the call?
I was trying to remember how this one came about because it's quite a while ago. And this was, I'm pretty sure this was my actual first voiceover audition. And I can't remember how I heard about it. I don't remember if it came through my agent at the time or if I was just I don't remember, because it's one of those things where in the past few years, talking to other people or you look at the voice, you look at the cast list, I'm like, oh, I know all these people. Seattle's a small town, and there's a lot of crossover between film and theater and voiceover actors. So I look at it, I'm like, oh, even in this game, there were people I'm like, oh, I didn't know that we actually ended up in a scene together, some friends of mine. So I don't remember how I heard about it, but I remember just thinking it was super fun. And I went, and I think she had me read for maybe 2 or 3 parts. And this is the one that we ended up with. Anne gave me some different, directions and ideas for voice qualities and things like that. It was the most fun playing with characters that I've ever had. She's like, oh, try this one a little more, a little more snotty, or give this one a little more scratch to it. Or, like she had both kind of personality things, but also like technical voice quality notes. So it was a really great experience for my very first voice audition.
And the character was Crorine Myers.
Yeah.
So what exactly did they tell you about her initially, the backstory, before you got to read? Read the dialogue, basically.
That's kind of funny, actually. So we actually recorded the first section, or most of it, and I didn't even... Are there spoilers in this thing?
Yes, we'll have to mention spoilers, but I think that's kind of like where we run anyway with every episode, because everybody's involved with the ending in some sort of way. So it's okay. We'll let it slide. Everybody can pause it and go ahead and play the game if they haven't yet. Warnings at Waverly Academy, but go ahead.
I was just going to say, so when we first started it, she gave me some notes about the character and kind of, some things like, oh, she's, try a little bit, a little snottier, a little more disappointed, a little more, like whatever the voices or the lines called for at the time. And then we found out after I had already done a bunch of the recording, she's like, okay, and now here's this. And I was like, oh, what? I'm the bad guy. That was the best surprise ever. And I was halfway through the recording, which was awesome because it didn't affect. And I think it actually made it kind of, sneakier, because if I had known, I mean, who knows, maybe I would have been unconsciously like infusing, lines with something that would have given it away. Who knows? But it was really
I didn't guess it. For me, I didn't guess it was her at all. I was kind of like, they were all normal girls, and I actually connected with her because she's so nervous about being around other people and being a nuisance. So I was like, oh my gosh, I totally connect with that. So when the ending came, I was like, wow, woo, there we go. Like I could connect with someone. It's like never black and white on whether or not, the person's good or bad, but she was up to no good, basically. And she kind of ruined her, chances as being a valedictorian, because that was the whole point of being on that specific floor with all the girls, just for those who want a little refresher. But yeah, that was kind of a big surprise.
Yeah, and it was a fun surprise to have afterward and be like, oh, how would that have affected me? So actually, I think it was very smart on their part. I mean, and perhaps that was a choice to make for someone who was at that point a more inexperienced voice actor. Maybe they would have made a different choice. I don't know. But it was fun. And I think it was a clever way to get the performance that they wanted and to keep more of the focus on that nervous energy and that kind of like, I mean, you say you identify it with right? Because it's like, oh, I'm that person who's like, oh, I'm just kind of plain speaking and kind of like got this attitude, but oh shoot, was that wrong? Did I do that wrong? Like absolutely. Sometimes it just falls out of your mouth and then, oh, whoops, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I thought like with her in particular, did you do any other dialogue either with Nancy or the other girls? I know there wasn't really much interaction with her character and everybody else, but was that at there any point where you guys met at the studio? Because I know it's a small town and that some of the people who worked on the game.
Yeah, no.
You guys did not meet at the recording studios?
No, it was just me, just working directly with the recorder. So I just did all of my parts.
How long did it take? Because I think with the villain of the piece, quote unquote villain, it's a little bit longer. Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. I probably spent a day there, half a day, something like that. It was not multiple days or anything. It was probably a full working day.
Oh wow, that was quick, right in and right out.
Yeah, they were. I was so impressed with the efficiency, and it's funny because you those first experiences really they leave an impression for one thing, because it was like, cool, I just did my first thing, Yeah. But also they were so efficient, and it's kind of a standard that I've sort of measured other things against since then. I've been like, oh, well, that took a really long time, or
yes.
They're just, it was so, they were such a well-oiled machine, and they just had such a clear idea of what they wanted. And so we would do like try it this way, 3 or 4 times, and then, okay, now you do what you want to do to play a little. Okay. And like, they were very generous, but very clear and succinct. And it was just like, wow, that was well-oiled machine is really the best way to put it.
Another additional refresher for those who haven't played the game in a long time, because it came out in 2009, 2010. Right. Basically, the whole premise of the game is at this specific school, they have a hall where the valedictorian candidates can be, and whoever wins that valedictorian spot gets a full ride to any college of their choice, which is something very realistic nowadays that usually happens. And Crorine actually finds out through a paper that the founder of the school had known Edgar Allan Poe, and apparently there might have been a last written work that he did that was hidden in the building, in the hall. So her premise was she wanted to first be valedictorian and also find this hidden piece of work from Edgar Allan Poe. And she gets a little dark with what she does. She is sending threatening messages with the black cat to individuals to kind of do and then there were none, just getting them thrown off the island, basically.
Yep. I hadn't thought of that connection. Yes.
And so, like, when you kind of first went through that, because it's very complicated once you get to the very end of it, it makes sense. But what did you ask, additional questions as to know what exactly was going on, just to make sure you could understand why this was, this was the way it was going to be, like the story was structured in that way?
I'm sure I probably did. But again, like I said, it was very, it was so efficient and quick moving that it was sort of like, okay, read these lines. If you have a question, stop and ask about the intent of it. But it wasn't so much worrying about it's different than like a film. You just have to make sure that it sounds right. You don't have to get like, your face and posture and emotions and all those things completely, what am I trying to say? I think it's possible to give the correct performance without fully understanding. That may be making everybody else's hair rise up on the back of their necks, or get angry about it. But I remember being like, okay, we're just going to do this. And that's why it was a surprise at the end. And maybe I would have realized what was going on sooner if I had asked a few questions.
I love that they had the Edgar Allan Poe connection, though, because I was such a fan of him. Were you a fan with him when you were growing up? Like, did you read anything about him, or?
Just mostly the work, and I loved, like hearing, cool, like people recite The Raven, or I loved, oh gosh, what's the one? Oh, I'm totally blanking out. Casca Amontillado, and like,
Yes. Oh my gosh, I forgot about that one. Also, like, one of the things about her is Crorine, and in particular, she kind of gets a little bit dark with the way she kind of sends these girls, running, packing their bags and running. One of them in particular was just claustrophobic, locking them in a closet. But the other one that kind of got to me, I was like, this person's kind of evil, is giving somebody an allergic reaction that they had to be hospitalized. And I was like, oh yeah, that's dark. That's taking it to another level when you mess with somebody's food. And I was like, no. Like, you can feel sympathy for someone, but then when you are really attacking them physically or through their fears, like, that's just really dark. So, I was kind of like, when she got really nasty towards the end, I was like, okay, this makes sense with all the things that have been going on. I'm like, ah.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the thing, like, some of that stuff is, and that's kind of the fun about like games or stories or anything, is you can take these big turns that I don't want to say out of character, but it was like, oh wow, oh, we went there. Oh, like, it's a quick evolution from like, oh, you don't like small spaces, to here's something that's like might make you extremely sick, It's you can take those big leaps, and I love that about games and just the medium. It's great.
What did you think of the other girls that were included in the game and their personalities?
Oh, it was really fun. It was fun to see, and especially having read for a couple of them, it was fun to see like what they settled on, and like are these the stock characters that you think of in like a movie or a book about like girls at a boarding school. But I liked how they were like, yeah, you had, the jock and all this, but they were all the smart girls. Like, that's what I loved, is that this was all under the umbrella of these are the smartest, most ambitious girls, right? And they have some variety to them, which I love that. I love that they, liked all the different things that they liked.
When you played the game and you heard yourself in the game, because this was your first voiceover job, what was your reaction to that?
Oh, it was so weird. It was so weird. And it was so fun to see it like paired up with the character art and be like, oh, that doesn't look anything like me. That's so fun. And it was just like, kind of, there are firsts, like as an actor, like your first time that you see someone, like I remember the moment being like 8 years old and seeing a production of Brigadoon and being like, I want to do that, and it was just like a high school production, but I thought it was so cool. And this was kind of another one of those things where like you hear your voice coming out of someone who looks nothing like you coming out of their mouth. And you're like, oh, this is awesome. I can do this. And I can be all the parts that I maybe couldn't play. Because no one's ever going to cast me as how old they're supposed to be, as a high schooler. It's so relieving. It's a whole other, and it certainly comes with other things. Like, I know I have kind of a young sounding voice. So sometimes, I get sent things where like the description says for, women in their late 30s. I'm like, well, that's not going to be me because I don't sound like I could be slightly older. Or, I eventually hear what the commercial ends up sounding like. I'm like, yep, they went for someone who has a slightly more mature sounding voice. I get that. Like, and you just need to know that about yourself. It's those limitations you have, but there's so much more you can do. It's so fun.
Yes, exactly.
I could be, an alien with one eye. I could be a robot, whatever, whatever the people's vision is.
Did you get through the whole game yourself?
I think I did. I think I made it through one time because I'm like, I was positive I wanted to like hear, I wanted to see the whole arc, but it took me a long time because I'm not a huge game player, honestly. So it took me a long time, and I had to get some help from my husband and be like, how does this work? We have another copy of, what do we have here? My husband was a voice in one as well, so we have a copy of Haunting of Castle Malloy. He's in that one.
What?
Yeah, he plays Kit.
Oh my God! Really?
Yeah. Matt Shimkus.
What are the odds? Are you kidding me?
Right? I guess it's a small town.
So have you been doing a couple more voiceover gigs recently? Are you still like to do gaming?
I love doing voiceover. I haven't been cast in anything for quite a while. I've done a couple of projects that haven't been finished yet. They're kind of getting worked on. One was actually for a mocap thing, so I did the voice for it, but also, and that's a whole other thing, but that hasn't come out yet. Yeah, and can't say anything else about that. But for the most part, it's been a lot of like, industrial corporate stuff.
and so you also sing and you write poetry and you perform those pieces. So have you been doing a little bit more of that since? Like, is that more of what you've been up to? Yeah,
mostly focusing on web series and some short films and things like that. The poetry shorts film is one that is based off of my own original poetry. It's called Tell Your Children, and it's in its last festival run, so it's about to be public online shortly. But you can look at that at poetryshorts.org. I'll push that. And it's 4 short films that are each 4 different poems. So I narrate them, but I wrote them as well. And I produced the whole thing and acted in a couple. But I hired other directors to kind of say, like, what does this sound like to you? Because poetry is so subjective. It's so subjective, and it completely depends on what the other people hear and what they're thinking as to what they get out of it. So it was neat to bring in other people and have them put their stamp on it.
What originally introduced you to poetry? Because I know I really didn't necessarily was interested in that until like high school, when my particular teacher in reading and writing was kind of adamant that we would read, different type of pieces overall, because it was like a various thing. But what kind of inspired you to take that route of writing poetry?
Well, it's I grew up in a house full of poets. My mom is a poet, and she was part of a poetry organization that I'm actually now a part of with her. So I grew up really with, like, I always, it's silly, but I have memories of sitting under the table and a bunch of poets sitting around the table, and chatting about it from when I was little tiny. So I grew up with it. And it was just kind of a thing I did, and got really involved. And I still love to write. And I'm on a couple of different literary organizations locally here in Tacoma and in the Seattle area. So it's just something that I've always loved. I love the performance aspect that has come out lately, especially in the schools. I shouldn't say lately, but the Poetry Out Loud program I think is awesome. I've been fortunate enough to be a judge for a couple of the local things. That's a big national competition where high school students perform poetry. And it's not their own, but it's neat. And it's not just what you think, not just like slam poetry. It's a performance of, so it's dramatic. And I've been really fortunate to watch some really amazing teenagers and young adults learn how to interpret and perform beautiful works of poetry, and that's been awesome. I love that.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
I love it. This is so fun.
And my final question for you is, if you could describe your experience working with Her Interactive and being a part of the Nancy Drew universe using one word, what would that be?
Oh God, only one?
Only one.
It doesn't seem like enough, but I think it encapsulates it. And I'm going to say inspirational, because it was my first thing and it really, set my teeth for the whole thing. And I loved how, like I said, the well-oiled machine and the big, it's part of something big that I loved already. So yeah, I'm going to go with that. Inspirational.